We do have another caller on the line. We have William from Texas. William?
Should we consider Hades and Earth to be one and the same place?
So could the point be made?
What does verses 17 and 18 mean?
John the Baptist?
Not Christian.
Great question. Great question. Good evening and welcome to GBNLive. We're so thankful that you're part of our program tonight. We have an outstanding program lined up. We're going to be talking about protecting our marriage. And I think that's a great theme. And we want to spend some time and talk about this God-ordained institution or relationship. We have with us tonight Brother B.J. Clark. Brother B.J. is no stranger to this program, been on the program on a number of occasions, and BJ, is always glad to have you.
Always enjoy being here.
We also have Brother Don Blackwell, and Don is no stranger to the program either. And Don, it's always so great to have you on.
Always good to be here.
Tonight, as we begin talking about this theme, protecting our marriages, and there's a lot that goes into the marital relationship, maybe the first thing we ought to do, because we live in a day and time when many folks don't even understand the biblical definition of marriage, because we've got a lot of folks that are advocating same-sex marriage. BJ, if someone were to stop you on the street and ask you, what does the Bible say about marriage and who's eligible to marry, what would you say?
That's a good question. Now, the first thing I'd try to point out is that marriage is God's idea, and it's not man's invention. And so since it belongs to God, Genesis chapter 2 is proof that it does, because He's the one that saw the loneliness of man in Genesis 2:18, and He said it wasn't good that man should be alone. That's the very first thing that He saw that was not good. Everything else He'd made was certainly good, but it wasn't good that man should be alone, and so He decided to cause a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. He slept, He took one of his ribs, closed up the flesh instead thereof, and from that rib He made a woman, brought her to the man, and Adam was very pleased. And then this editorial comment from Moses' inspired pen, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Now that was God's original arrangement. We can't improve upon it. He's God and we are not, and yet some are trying to redefine God's marriage plans, and really that's presumptive and arrogant, because who are we to take something God made and God designed and say, no, we're going to redesign it and remodel it? We don't have that authority. And so it deserves to be protected. That's our subject tonight, protecting our marriages. Why does it deserve to be protected? Because it's a God-ordained institution, and God doesn't make something without providing protective means whereby to secure it and keep it under control. And so I'm glad we're talking about this subject tonight. If there's anything America needs to discuss, it is this subject right here.
I think you're exactly right. As a matter of fact, while you were talking, it occurred to me that the home is the foundation, the bedrock of any society. And we talk about the struggles and the problems that we're facing in our country today. Do you think that there's a correlation there? We talk about all of the problems that are going on in our country today, and then you look at the marital relationship, the home as we know it. Don, what about the home being the foundation of a nation?
Certainly it is, because if you begin to break down units to the most basic, you get down to a husband and a wife, a man and a woman, and that, of course, is going to be the building block. I think about Psalm 127 that says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. If we have homes not built upon the foundation or the Word of God, they're not going to be what they should be, and that's the basic building block. So if we take building blocks, if you were to build a house and you formed bricks out of mud and each brick was flawed in some way, and you put that together into a house, that house is going to be weak. It's not going to stand. And in the same sense, the basic building block of the country, being the family, if that house is not built upon the Word of God and we use those building blocks to build the nation, what we're going to have is a nation that's not righteous, that's not going to stand, it's not going to be pleasing to God. And so this is fundamental not only to having good homes, but having a country that's solid and stands and is worth living in.
Absolutely. You know, in Matthew chapter 7, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talked about the wise and foolish builders. And I love what Jesus said, whoever hears these things of mine and doeth them, him shall I liken unto a wise man. God has given us sage advice for the home. Sadly, many folks have followed the pattern of the foolish man, and they haven't listened to what God said, and thereby chaos has entered into the marital relationship.
And something Don just said triggered a thought that I'd never connected as closely before as I should have. Talked about righteousness, and we've always quoted Proverbs 14:34, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. But what makes up the nation? Homes. And in 2 Timothy chapter 3, in the very same context in which he says that the scriptures are profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, the lead into all of this is Timothy being told by Paul, from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus. So if we want our homes, our nation to be righteous, we start with our home.
That's right.
And how do we make our home righteous? We go to this book, which is God's instruction in righteousness. We pass it on to our children, and the Bible says, everyone that doeth righteousness is righteous. 1 John chapter 2:29. And so this is really God's gift to the home and to marriage as to how to put those righteous boundaries around it.
Absolutely.
And Mike, what BJ was talking about a moment ago from Genesis 2, the foundation of the home, we read about God creating the woman and bringing her to the man. When you get to the New Testament, in Matthew 19, verses 4 through 6, verse 6 specifically says, what God has joined together, let not man put asunder. That tells us that the home, when a man and woman are joined together, God is the one that creates that home. He's the one that joins them together. Now, the big issue, and this is not our topic tonight, but this issue of same-sex marriage, homosexual marriage. Our society wants to say you can join two men together. But according to the Bible, God is the one who does the joining.
That's right.
And so if two men say we're going to get married, the Lord never joins them. And so what you have is a flawed building block. It's not really a home by the biblical definition. And you build a nation on those type of building blocks, and it's going to be a disaster. And that's where we're going to be headed in this country if we keep building that way.
And I think about, you bring the husband and the wife together, as you mentioned in Matthew chapter 19, which takes us back to Genesis chapter 2, and the fact that God joins that couple together, and God needs to be at the core of that relationship. You know, when we perform marriage ceremonies, typically we will perform the ceremony, then we step away and they go on to live their life. Well, God joins that couple together, but God needs to remain a part of that couple's life for the duration of that marital relationship.
Amen.
We've got a caller on the line we'd like to take right now.
Hi, how are you guys doing? Mr. Blackwell knows me, and a little bit about my background. I'm actually I converted from Islam. Phil is not my real name. I like to use a pseudonym. I don't like to put my information out on television and things like that. But my question actually concerns, and I'm glad you brought it up, about same-sex marriage, but at the same time, so I like to ask a lot of questions being new in Christianity. So my question is kind of not on that level, but how should we treat marriages that we know aren't right? And I'm not talking about same-sex marriages. I'm talking about adulterous marriages. Now, Mr. Blackwell, you and I were both prior military. You and I both know and have friends, and we know people where the divorce rate is so high, and we know like how many people, 90% of divorces and remarriages in the military are unbiblical. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I have a friend who's been married 3 times, and I don't know how to react to it because I know that he did not get biblically divorced and remarried. So how do we not only protect our marriages, but how should we react to, I guess, marriages we know that God did not bring together, especially around our secular friends?
Sure. I think that's a great question. And Don, since you've got history here, how would you respond to that?
Bill, that is a great question. And if I understand the question right, you're asking if we've got people that, we're not talking necessarily about Christians, but co-workers, people in the world, and they're in unscriptural marriages. How do we react toward them? And a passage that immediately came to my mind was in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Because in 1 Corinthians 5, Paul is dealing with a problem that was taking place in the church in Corinth. They had fornication going on in the church. And he addresses that, and he says you're to take action against this brother who's in a sinful relationship in the church. You're to withdraw from him. Don't keep company with this brother who's in a sinful relationship. But when you get down to verse 9, this is what he says. I wrote to you in an epistle not to keep company with fornicators. Now listen to verse 10. Yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or the extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out of the world. And so what he's saying here is, when it comes to a brother in Christ who's living in a sinful relationship, the church has to take action. You can't fellowship that, you can't endorse it. He says, but if you're talking about people in the world who are living in sin, you can't withdraw from every person in the world and deal with every person in the world. He says in verse 11, but now I have written unto you not to keep company if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator or covetous or idolater or railer or drunkard, with such a one know not to eat. And he's pointing out the fact that if we had to withdraw ourselves from every person in the world who is a fornicator, we would have to go out of the world, because it's just not possible to deal with that situation. So that tells us we're going to treat a brother who's in this situation differently from people who are in the world who are in this situation.
Okay, that definitely helps out a good bit. Now, I guess I'm not going to try to take up too much of your time, so this is my last question. But so then I guess the next question is I would never I know people who are homosexual, and I would never call another man, quote unquote, partner, their husband, because I don't believe men have husbands. Do we use that same logic, I guess? And correct me if I'm wrong, but do we use that same logic, I guess, for an adulterous remarriage?
We've got to make a distinction here. One, in 1 Corinthians 5, you're not going to take action in the sense that you're going to withdraw yourself from them. But that doesn't mean that you endorse it. It doesn't mean that you go along with this. It doesn't mean that a person who's in a homosexual marriage, you're going to say, we're good with this, we're supportive of this, because certainly a Christian can never support sin. And so that distinction, I'm glad you said that, so that distinction could be made.
Sure. Just because the government recognizes same-sex marriage, or even couples who have no right to be married, they are granted the liberties of marriage in our country. We don't endorse those because the Bible doesn't.
Right. I'll give you an example, Bill. My father was not a Christian, and he entered into third or fourth marriage. I don't remember what it was. And he wanted me to come to his marriage and to the wedding ceremony and support it. And I said to him, I cannot come to that. And I said, it's not scriptural. You don't have a right to be together. God is not going to join you. I don't feel like I can come and be party to this that I know is wrong. And so that's the way I approached it. He wasn't a member of the church, so we didn't withdraw fellowship from him per se. But at the same time, I wanted him to know I cannot endorse this or sanction this in any way that I know to be wrong.
And by the same token, if a couple approached you and asked you to join them in marriage, but they didn't have a biblical right, you would refuse to do that, just as you would refuse to perform same-sex marriage.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Great.
Okay.
Thanks for answering my question.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you so much. Interesting questions.
Yeah, Jesus also said in John 17:15, I pray not that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from evil, recognizing that his apostles were going into some very hostile territories. And yet the solution was not for them to stay away from those who needed the influence. Jesus associated with sinners, but not to participate in their transgressions. He taught them, and we need to be salt and light to a world that desperately needs that salt and light, and we can do so without compromise. But I know of a situation that's a real life situation in the states that are now authorizing same-sex marriage. There's a situation in a school system where two of the female teachers got married, as the United States now would define and allow that. And so one of them changed their last name. And so some of the teachers, faced now with this, do I call this person by the last name of something that I know is not really a scriptural marriage? And this is a difficult, unfortunate, thorny problem that we're facing. We can't compromise the truth, but we also can't just walk away and turn our backs on people and not try to be an influence to show them the truth.
That's right. Well, look at Jesus in John chapter 4 when he met the woman at the well. She'd been married 5 times. She's living with a guy, but the Lord made a tremendous impact on her life. And not just hers, but she influenced others. And so
He didn't give up on her, did he?
That's right. That's right. And I think that obviously we want to be salt and light in the world and to use our influence. We would never condone sin. We don't want to condone sin. The Lord didn't condone sin.
Right.
But he was interested in people and in the souls of people. Jesus said the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. And so just as he was concerned about the lost, we too ought to be concerned. As we continue our program, since we've had a question raised that concerns, adultery, divorce, remarriage, etc., we do have a question that has come in, and let me just read the question for you. Anthony Grigsby has written in a question: can the guilty party be in a relationship without it being considered adultery? And can the couple that is divorced be reconciled? BJ, how do you respond to that?
Some have suggested that the guilty party could be free to remarry because they've been put away. But what this ignores is that Matthew 19 and verse 9 is talking about being bound to more than just the partner to whom you're married. You're also bound to God's law, which either authorizes or doesn't authorize one to marry. And if I put away my mate for if I'm guilty of adultery, just for sake of illustration, and my wife puts me away, how does that somehow now qualify me to have the same privilege and right the innocent party my wife would have? It doesn't. And so some people say, well, it's like handcuffs. They used to use the handcuffs illustration and say, well, once the handcuffs are broken, you're no longer handcuffed. But their analogy failed because they forgot that you're also handcuffed to the consequences of your actions and to the authority of the Word of God. You never escape that. And it does not allow the guilty party to scripturally remarry.
Absolutely. And don't you think that maybe we ought to inject at this point in time that God's laws concerning marriage and divorce are applicable to all people?
Yes.
Whether in or out of the church. Because I think sometimes people have the idea that, well, because they didn't understand what the Bible had to say, or maybe because they weren't a Christian, God's law based on Matthew chapter 19 doesn't apply. But that's not correct, is it, BJ?
No, in fact, I'll tell you, if anyone wonders whether the apostles understood the strictness of Jesus' teaching in Matthew 19:9, all they have to do is read the next verse, Matthew 19:10. The disciples said in response to this one exception policy for divorce and remarriage, the disciples said, well, if the case of man be so with his wife, it's not good to marry. It's better to just avoid being in a position where you're that confined, is the seeming implication. And Jesus said, well, not all men are going to want to abide by these rules, but if you're going to be married, you're going to have to abide by these rules. And he says some are eunuchs because someone made them that way against their will. But he said there are also some who make themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. I know of a man where I first preached years ago. He's long since passed on to his reward. He told me point blank when I met him, he said, Brother Clark, I can never remarry. I can never marry because of an action I did in my 20s. He said, I'm now in my 70s. I'm so close to home. And he said, I've lived a single life, but it will be worth it all in the end. Heaven will be worth it.
And sometimes I hear people saying, surely God doesn't expect me to live alone or to live a celibate life, and yet that's exactly what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 19, is it not?
Yeah, it is exactly. And as BJ was saying a moment ago, the disciples recognized how strict this is, and apparently it's rather shocking to them when they hear it, to say, their reaction, if I can paraphrase it, is, Lord, this is really, really strict. If it is that strict, maybe it's better just not to get married,
right.
because this is really strict. And so when people take that approach, they need to go back and look at the disciples' reaction, because they got it. It is that strict.
Right. And you know, we talk about protecting our marriage and divorce. The best time to get a divorce is before you ever get married.
Yes.
And I think that maybe one of the things that we need to do by way of protecting our marriages is to really stress to our young folks the importance of the permanency and the commitment involved in the marital relationship. I think that maybe sometimes people enter into this relationship and they don't really understand the magnitude of what they're getting involved in.
Yeah.
This is some serious stuff. And you talk about, you know, if you make a mistake and the consequences are that if this marriage doesn't work and you don't have scriptural grounds, then you have to live a celibate life. And so you need to think about that before you get married.
Which shows you how valuable marriage is, because you don't protect something that is not all that valuable to you. You don't lock it up in a safe. Those old airplanes you used to make out of balsa wood that were so crumbly. I never thought that was such an item that I had to, put it in a safe or anything like that, compared to what you might put something in there that's really, truly valuable. Right. Marriage is so valuable. God built a hedge around leaving it that is so strict. And that's for the children's sake. It's for society's sake. It's for the husband and wife's sake.
And don't you think God knows best?
Amen. Yes.
I think He does. We got Jim Dearman on the line, and Jim is a great friend of ours and appreciate all that he does in the kingdom. Jim, good to have you tonight.
Well, it's good to be with you, and appreciate the emphasis that you're giving to protecting our marriage. I'm enjoying the program very much. Appreciate the two good men you have there with you, Mike, DJ and Don, doing a great job on a very important subject.
Well, we got some great guys on the panel tonight, and I know you were on the panel not long ago, and what a great job you did, and we appreciate you and all of your efforts in the kingdom. And I know that this topic tonight, protecting our marriages, is important to you, and you've, I guess, led the way in trying to keep marriages intact as you preach and teach, and maybe talk a little bit about some of your efforts.
Well, of course, all of us who preach the gospel are vitally interested in the home and the family. That's true, Mike, and you do a great job in that respect. All of you three men there and so many others who could be named, I appreciate your kind words. But, one of the things that has been most gratifying, one thing that's been most gratifying to me in recent years, is the opportunity to be a part of the Great Smoky Mountain marriage retreat. One of the events that is overseen by the Jacksonville Church of Christ in Jacksonville, Alabama. The great eldership there, great congregation. Alan Pepster, of course, the preacher there, and Alan is the director of the marriage retreat. And of course, they do polishing the pulpit, as so many brethren are well aware. But the marriage retreat, I emceed it several years ago, and then the following year I spoke on the marriage retreat, and then I've been emceeing it every year since then. In fact, BJ, who's with you tonight, was one of our speakers not long ago, did his usual tremendous job in that. And every year it is just so gratifying to see 400 plus couples join us for this marriage retreat. It's a great time of fellowship, of course. It's a great time of fun, but it is something also that is so vitally important in the very thing you're talking about tonight, that is protecting our marriage. We have heard from couples who have come to the retreat, Christian couples, whose marriages may have been struggling, and in fact were. And yet we've heard afterwards from them, some follow-up that Alan has shared with those of us involved, that they had said it did so much to salvage a marriage in some cases, to solidify marriages in so many other cases. And so it's just an event that I really encourage Christian couples to strongly consider. It's not too late to register for this year's event, February 17th through the 21st. And you can go to SmokyMountainMarriage.com and get all of the information there about the registration, about the speakers this year. It's Glenn Hitchcock and Jason Rollo, who are the two speakers. And we just have a lot of fun. We have a not-so-new newlywed game that we start off with, where we have a lot of fun with the couples. And of course, I'm supposed to, as the MC, I guess I'm supposed to be funny, and I say, I guess they'll let me do it as long as I don't start to be funny for the wrong reasons, you know.
Sure, I understand.
Just because I'm old and people laugh at you. But we do really have a lot of fun, and I would strongly encourage couples to consider it. Of course, it's advertised throughout the Brotherhood, and so many are aware of it. But that website will give couples all of the information they would need about it. But February 17th through the 21st, Clinging to the Intangibles is the theme. And Alan and those associated, West Blankenship and others who are involved, do such a good job with it at the Jacksonville Church. And I'm just privileged to be a part of it. I appreciate their allowing me to be a part of it year in and year out as the MC.
Sure. I know it's a first-class program, and I know that your involvement in it is not only beneficial to you but others. And I like what you said about there are couples out there that sometimes are in the midst of problems, they're struggling, they're concerned about the longevity of their relationship, and to think that it might be a program like this could help get them back on track, get them back on solid footing, and maintain that relationship and grow together and grow in their love for one another and for God.
Exactly, and we as I said, Mike, we have had demonstrations of that occurring, certainly. Also, on Wednesday night, the retreat starts unofficially, I suppose you'd say, with the Wednesday night service there at the Sevierville congregation where John Daniel preaches, and one of the speakers speaks there on Wednesday night, and then officially the marriage retreat starts on Thursday night, and at 6 with our fun and games with the not-so-new newlywed game, and goes through Friday afternoon, and then there's a break, and then Friday night, just a few-hour break, and then Friday night we do that same track again. The reason for that is because of the popularity of it, in order to be able to accommodate those who want to attend and keep the same venue there, and also it is for the reason that some cannot get away from their jobs on a Thursday and a Friday, but can be there for Friday night and Saturday. So it accommodates those whose schedules will not allow them to come for just one track. So
that's great.
Of course, the people who, the speakers, have to hear my saying jokes, both tracks if I repeat my jokes.
Well, they are funny, I will tell you that. You had them rolling in the aisles, Brother Dearman. And it was a fun time. And he's right about the growth of this. I went to one of the very first ones. They had 20 couples there, and I was not prepared. Hadn't been able to go back in years, and then went back a couple of years ago, and 400 plus couples, and everything that Brother Webster in Jacksonville does seem to turn to gold.
Absolutely.
They do a good job with it. And what greater benefit could we have than to spend time lifting up marriage? And it is a glorious, glorious time. It's really time well spent.
Yeah.
It is. You're right, BJ. And another thing, too, it not only affords the couples the opportunity to hear these great speakers and to get that material, but it affords them the opportunity to spend time together, because they have designed the retreat so that you have some free time to spend with your wife. Of course, you leave the kiddos at home, and just the husband and wife, but they have time to be together and to grow and to spend that time. It's just a beautiful combination, really, of activities that the brethren have put together in this retreat.
Well, we appreciate your efforts in this regard, and I know that in our country and in the church as well, we need to really focus on getting marriage right. And for too many years, marriage has been expendable in the eyes of many. And so I think every effort that's undertaken to strengthen this relationship that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Well, I agree, and I appreciate the Jacksonville Brethren so very much for their initiative and starting it, and then the growth of it over the years, and the good that they continue to do, and that you brethren do, and all the work that you are doing, and just this program tonight, and Gospel Broadcasting Network, what it means to the world and to our brotherhood. It's just it's tremendous. And,
Wow.
we are grateful for you, Mike, and the great job you do, and hosting the GBNLive, and all the good brethren that are with you there. It's great program and a great network.
Well,
We appreciate it.
thank you, and thank you for all that you mean to the network and all that you've done in the past. And we've been blessed to know you and love you and appreciate you, and hope to have you back here on the program again real soon.
Yep.
Look forward to it. Love and appreciate you, brethren, and thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to promote the marriage stream.
Okay. Thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Okay, Rose.
All right, bye. Great upcoming seminar.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hope people will avail themselves of this great opportunity. I think we have another caller on the line, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I have a question for you all concerning the marriage, divorce, and remarriage.
Okay.
My wife and I have some good friends that are now married, and the husband was once married, and his first wife left him, and he fought to keep the marriage together, but the first wife went ahead, filed for divorce, and left him. And now he's married to his wife, present-day wife. The question is, since that, we're not sure whether that was scriptural or not, and the second wife really was not aware of all, is not really, how to put it, she wasn't aware biblically of how the Bible talks about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Mm-hmm. She entered into this relationship and has since been studying with us, and she's actually read Muscle and a Shovel, and is the point of now wanting to be baptized. But the question is, since she came out of this marriage, or entered into this marriage with this man who was once married and has been divorced and is now married to her, if she is baptized, where does she stand with this current relationship? Does she stay in it, or does she go ahead and exit out of it and quote-unquote nullify it, and her daughter live separate from the child they have together now?
Sure. Great question. And the gentleman that fought to maintain that relationship, was there adultery? What was that the reason why she exited the relationship initially? Don, how would you respond to that?
The person who had called and asked this question is apparently hung up, and that's important because one of the things I would say is I want some more information before I answer this question. When you get into marriage divorce scenarios, there's a lot of things that you need to know. That's right. Because you want to answer this carefully according to the Scriptures.
That's right.
And the Bible says, if a man puts away his wife, except it be for fornication, and he marries another, he commits adultery. And he that marrieth her that is put away doth commit adultery, Matthew 19:9. And so if this man, if I understand the question, so his wife left him. Why did she leave him?
See, I think that's a pertinent question.
If she left him because he committed adultery, then you've got one scenario. If he was innocent and his wife left him because she was committing adultery, then you have a different scenario. He had the right to put her away. And so I don't know that I have the pieces to answer this question without being able to ask some more.
I thought he was going to stay on the line,
yeah.
and apparently he jumped off, and maybe he'll call back in just a moment.
But the answer I would give is, if this man, his wife who left him, she committed adultery, then he had the right to put her away for fornication and the right to remarry, which would make his second marriage scriptural. And the woman they're about to be baptized is fine because she's in a scriptural marriage, assuming this is her first marriage, and so we don't know that either. So.
Yeah, and obviously, she is sensitive to truth because she's been studying, and she wants to do what's right, which is commendable. So, okay, we've got an email question that has come in. James Stewart writes, what advice would you give a young married couple with a newborn? Great question. BJ, how do you respond to that?
Pray. No, actually, it's such a joy to. The Bible even talks about having your quiver full of children, and it is a blessing. And in all seriousness, prayer is a vital part of this. And I remember hearing about a mother that was expecting a child. She was reading the Bible as she sat in a rocking chair. She was just relaxing and rocking back and forth. And someone says, do you always read out loud when you read the Bible? And she said, well, I'm actually not reading to myself. She said, I'm reading to my child. And they looked funny at her as if to say, you don't really believe your newborn child understands any of the words that you're saying, do you? And she is reported to have said, well, no, I don't, but the time will come when he or she will understand.
That's right. And
what a great thing to be able to tell them that from the time I knew that I was carrying you.
You know what, you referenced a moment ago, 2 Timothy chapter 3:15, and that from a babe.
Right.
It
starts right away. And so as you think about the life that we live nowadays, is often so full of hustle and bustle, and the children sometimes in our modern day society get the dregs of what parents have left to give, and that's not God's plan. God's plan is that the children would be given a priority and teaching in time spent. No one has ever repented on their deathbed of spending less time at the office than they think they should have. But I've known a lot of folks who on their deathbed would say, I wish I'd spent more time with my family.
Lots of regret.
And so one thing I would say definitely to parents who have young children is do not doubt me on this particular point. It's been proven over and over. You'll turn around 3 times and those children will be grown and graduating from high school, and the time is so short. That's why we start early. And we do all that we can in their early stages of development. Someone walked into a sculptor's workshop and found a sculpture that had its sharply defined features. The nose, the ears, the mouth, the eyes were well defined. Right next to it was the same mold, sculpture from the same mold, but didn't have the sharp features. And the sculptor was asked, why is there such a difference? This one is so sharp and this one's so blurry. And he said, well, I waited too long to try to stamp the impression on this one. It had cooled too much before I tried to stamp the impression, and so it didn't take as well as it would have if I'd gotten to it sooner. And that's the way we are with our young children. We've got to start early.
Start extremely early. I think about a question that was posed on one occasion to parents. Where will your children spend eternity? And the response is, in all probability, where you do. That says that we have tremendous responsibility resting upon our shoulders. And you talked about reading the scriptures to them and starting early and pointing them in the direction of God. And you cited Psalm 127 about happy is the man who has his quiver full of them, talking about children. In that context, he talks about laying the foundation and laying that foundation with God, because he said, except the Lord built the house, they that labor in vain. And so there needs to be a tremendous exertion of effort pointing them in the direction of heaven.
Mike, if I could offer this, we don't always get questions in advance. Sometimes they come in during the program. Sometimes people ask out loud, and we don't have time to think about these. But we did receive this one in advance, and I sat down with my wife, and I just ran this question by her. And I said, a young couple has a young child, a year old. What do they do to maintain the marriage? And I wanted to hear it from her standpoint, and we talked through this. Of course, our children are pretty well grown, one married and 2 older now, but we went through that and experienced that. And we talked about one of the aspects. Of course, the spiritual part is so very important, raising your children up, making sure you have them at worship services and family devotionals. But we talked some about the aspect that there is still the physical need between the husband and the wife. And a lot of times when you have a newborn in the house, it changes things because you're tired. Sometimes couples will let that young child or baby sleep with them every night. And I'm not saying that that's always wrong, but I'm saying that that could cause a problem. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I think that is important for us to point out, if you ask the question, what is the closest relationship between any two human beings? Someone might be tempted to say, well, it would be a mother and daughter or a parent and child, but that's not right. It is only about the marriage relationship, only about the husband and wife that the Bible says that they are one flesh. That's right. And so the wife can't forget that I have responsibility to my husband, and the husband can't forget I've got responsibility to my wife. Now, the husband can help with some of these things. Maybe he's been working and the wife's been home and she's tired taking care of the little one all day long, and he comes home and he has the idea I've got needs, but he can help with things. He can help do the dishes. He can help clean the house. He can help ease her burden so that they can still be there together as they should, because if that starts eroding, we're talking about protecting marriages tonight. If you start eroding the physical relationship and the time that the husband and wife need for each other, that's when your marriage is going to get in big trouble.
Absolutely. Well, 1 Corinthians chapter 7.
1 Corinthians chapter 7, that's right. That the husband's body is not his own, the wife's is not her own. Mm-hmm. You're not to forsake one another, and to avoid fornication. Right. Let each man have his own wife and woman have her own husband. The point being that there's a temptation, a draw that is there, and if your husband or wife is not fulfilling that, then temptation's knocking at the door, and that's what we're talking about tonight, is avoiding this. And I know we've got a caller who wants to talk to us about some things, but I wanted to say one more thing very quickly here. There's an old book, I think everybody knows about it, came out in the 1980s by William Harley, His Needs, Her Needs. And I've always liked the book because he was a marriage counselor, and he said, in my 20 years of marriage counseling, here's the top 5 needs I found of a man, the top 5 needs I found for a woman. But it's very biblical based. You can put scriptures with each one of these points. And when we're talking about protecting our marriages, one of the things we can look at is, what are the top 5 needs of a man, the top 5 needs of a woman? Meet those needs and you'll protect your marriage.
Great point.
When you've got little children, don't forget those needs. In fact, they might be intensified during those periods. Very quickly, he says in his book, the top 5 needs of a woman: number 1, affection; number 2, conversation; number 3, honesty and openness; number 4, financial support; number 5, family commitment for the man. Number 1, he said, my experience has been sexual fulfillment. Number 2, recreational companionship. Number 3, an attractive spouse. I know our society would scoff at that and say, looks don't matter. But you're talking about protecting your marriage. And so we need to be real about this. Number 4, domestic support. And number 5, admiration. And if we're going to protect our marriages, you've got to look at the top needs. Now, it wouldn't be exactly the same for every husband and every wife.
Close.
But it's close. That's
absolutely,
right.
Absolutely. And we need to take advantage of every, if somebody comes up with a list like that and you begin to look at it and think about it, probably in a general sense, I would think that would probably typify the population. Too. Very much so. Got a caller on the line, Rob Whitaker with us. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Don.
Hey, Rob, how are you tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. What a great topic to discuss.
We appreciate you calling. I actually asked Brother Rob if he would call us tonight because Rob is a gospel preacher and he does a lot of marriage seminars. And I thought while we're talking about marriage and protecting our marriages, it would be great to hear Rob talk about the things he does in these seminars. And he also does a lot of marriage counseling for young couples. And maybe he could share with us some words of advice that he offers to these young couples. Would you do that for us, Rob?
I would be glad to do it. In discussing marriage with couples, I'm reminded of what Peter wrote in 2 Peter 1:3. According to his divine power, he has given us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him. And that if we believed in the scriptures, we're going to understand that all the answers that God has given for marriage can be found in the scriptures. And as good as all the books are in the marriage self-help sections of religious stores, and there are some great books. You've mentioned one of them tonight. Steve Farrar, Point Man, is another good book. There are just a lot of tools There's no tool greater than the Word of God. And the greatest tool that's in the Scriptures has got to be God's handbook on marriage. I'm reminded of a quote by Brother Curtis Cates about the Song of Solomon, where he said, quote, "Song of Solomon is the greatest work ever on true married love. It is must reading and study for those of us contemplating marriage, and for those of us who aren't married, brethren, read the instructions." So what we've done the last several years is we have put some of these books aside, and my wife and I have placed a great emphasis on the Song of Solomon, and we want the couple that we meet with to become intimately involved in the Song of Solomon and the relationship between Solomon and his wife, or his bride-to-be. There are some wonderful principles in this book that help prepare couples for marriage. We ask, why did God give us this book? It's God's marriage handbook. And I believe, as Brother Kate said, brother, we need to read the instructions. And when you go through the Song of Solomon, you'll see principles like purity that are stressed before marriage. In fact, in the second chapter in verse 7, it says, "I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the roes and the hinds of the field, that you stir not up or awake my love until it pleases." And there are principles like this about before marriage, not awakening the love, the passion that needs to be kept sleeping until marriage. A little bit later in that chapter, there's a very interesting verse, and I like to start out with couples. And this is what it says: "Catch the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vine, for our vines have tender grapes." In other words, Solomon was wanting to talk to his wife-to-be, Shulamith, the Shulamite woman. He says, before we get married, there are some things that we need to talk about. One of those things is purity. And before the marriage relationship comes into effect, to discuss how are we going to keep ourselves pure so that when we enter the marriage relationship, we are as God intended. But later in the book, he stresses it again. In fact, in chapter 3, verse 5, and in chapter 8 and verse 4, this pledge for purity is repeated even after the marriage. So there are principles in this book, and as good, again, as these self-help books are, I believe the greatest book is the Word of God. It's able to guide us into all knowledge pertaining to life and godliness. And so this is what that I like to commonly do with couples who sit down, is to go through this book and allow them to see this love story, this greatest love story, Shakespeare's superior, if you will, the Song of Solomon, and share with them some of the principles that God has given, the tools that God has given to help prepare us for marriage, and then to make our marriages strong.
That's exactly right, and I appreciated that. That's one of the things I was hoping you would talk about tonight, was the emphasis on the Song of Solomon, and that is something that you use, because oftentimes people want to turn to all of these books written by men to get advice, and as you said, there's some good ones, and a lot of them are based on the Bible, but when it comes to issues relating to marriage, God has given us the answers, everything that we need to know about marriage. In fact, when I do marital counseling with people that have been struggling in their marriage, I think one of the things that they're maybe surprised about is I don't have any magic formula. I don't have any do this exercise and it's going to fix it. Usually we spend the first session figuring out what the problems are, and then we go through biblical principles and say, now you need to apply these biblical principles and it will fix the problems in your marriage, because it is the guidebook to of course, all of life and child rearing and marriage.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It just so happens that I've been teaching Song of Solomon this week in the school, and so it's fresh on my mind, and it's so appropriate to bring up on a program like this, because you look at this and the things that just jump off the page at you. This couple longs for togetherness. They long to be able to touch one another in the God-approved way, and they long to talk to one another. There's actually a talking that takes place, and this talking is not tearing down with words of criticism, constant words of affirmation in language that doesn't always resonate with our modern culture and things of that nature as far as some of the descriptive phrases. But the bottom line is we go out of our way to find a way to express our love to our mate. I read about one man that told his wife, he says, compared to my love for you, King Kong's just a little bitty monkey. That seems like a very odd way to put it. I will grant you that. But he took the time to say it.
Sure.
And you protect your marriage when you compliment your spouse, because I can promise you this, someone may compliment your spouse at work, And if it's not you and someone is telling them, oh, you're the greatest, or you look nice, or this, that, or the other, human nature sometimes gives in to those things. And we don't need to be in chat rooms chatting with some stranger we don't even know and sharing our deepest feelings and having them commend us for our wisdom and this, that, or the other. All those are ways to destroy your marriage and open doors to destroy it. When we protect our marriages when we communicate, when we spend time together, and when we long for one another, and when we worship God together.
I think you're right. And I would also encourage people to read the book of Proverbs with regard to marriage. Solomon has a lot of great advice in the book of Proverbs about protecting your marital relationship, particularly from the male's vantage point. And I think that's very important. One of the things that I thought about was Rob mentioned Brother Curtis Cates, and I think in about 1994 or so, the School of Preaching lectureship was on the Song of Solomon and Ecclesiastes. And so if you have that book, or if you can find that book, I would encourage you to get it and read it, because there's some great material in there.
It made me think of this just as a humorous thing. BJ was saying there's a lot of complimenting in the book of Song of Solomon, and some are things we wouldn't necessarily say today, but Song of Solomon chapter 6 and verse 5, Solomon says to his wife, your hair is like a flock of goats. And I thought, that was a great compliment for him to say to her, but probably not one that would work today. You probably don't want to use that one.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rob, thank you so much for being on the program tonight. Appreciate those words of wisdom.
Thanks,
I appreciate being on the program. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. We do have another question that's come in by way of email. How can you prove fornication if the spouse is denying? And I guess those of us who are preachers that have dealt with couples have probably all faced this very dilemma. And so how do you respond to that, Don?
This is a tough scenario. It is one that, as you mentioned, I have faced a number of times over the years, because a member of the congregation will come to me and they will say, I divorced because I'm pretty sure my spouse was committing fornication. Or I'm thinking about putting away my spouse because I think that they are committing fornication. What I have said to them is this. If it hasn't happened yet, I say, hire a private investigator and get proof of this. You need to be sure about this. This is not something you want to guess at, because if you suspect they're committing fornication and you don't have proof and they're denying it, and you put them away and then think you have the scriptural right to remarry, you were taking your soul and your eternity into your hands. Now, how do you go about proving it? I guess that would just depend on the situation and a lot of things, but and maybe the private investigator is not always the answer, but you can substitute that in, do what you need to do to get the proof of this, because you've got to be certain, because you're talking about a heaven-hell issue here.
You know, years ago, I had a phone call one Sunday afternoon from a girl, a member of the church, and she said that her husband had committed adultery. And she said, I just know in my heart he's done it. And of course, there was a lot of circumstantial evidence, and there was pornography involved and a lot of different things. And I said, look, you need to be very careful. And I said, because I said, what if, you know, in your mind you say he has, but what if he hasn't? And I said, you put him away thinking that he was guilty, when in fact he was innocent. And I said, then you go out and get married again. I said, let me tell you, now you're in adultery. Yeah. And so you need to be very, very careful. I don't have all the answers. I do know that a private investigator, I've seen that happen before, but again, sometimes, you know, they can get information. Maybe they have pictures of togetherness and stuff, but you know, again, do you have that rock solid evidence, and do you feel comfortable proceeding? I would encourage anyone to proceed with extreme caution. Would you not, BJ?
Well, absolutely. You think about the Bible says that we're to provide things honest in the sight of all men, making sure of our knowledge, and be sure your sins will find you out. Numbers 32:23. By their fruits ye shall know them, Matthew 7. These hidden things tend to come to light, and so even we get impatient and we see some people rush this when in fact they ought to verify before they act, because the consequences are eternal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that from the vantage point of the spouse who thinks there may be something going on, and sometimes, where there's smoke, there's fire. But in this case, because of the gravity of the situation, I would counsel somebody to you better be rock solid sure before you put somebody away.
Absolutely.
For that cause, and I would want to have absolute proof.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
We've got one other caller on the line we'd like to take right now. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. GBN
How
Live.
you doing? I'm actually watching y'all right now.
Okay, great.
First, I wanted to ask for a prayer request because my husband, Scott Barrow, has Lou Gehrig's disease. So I'm just asking for prayer request for that right quick.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, we would be happy to keep him and keep you in our prayers for sure. It's a terrible disease.
Well, the question I have is, I was married before, and my husband at the time kept leaving me, so I wound up divorcing him, and I got married to him. And I was just wondering, because we had studied it in church, because I'm a Church of Christ in Washington, North Carolina. And I was just wondering, am I doing any kind of, I don't know exactly how to ask the question, but since we were studying it, and I kept thinking, well, about the adultery and stuff, and even though I got remarried and I got baptized into the church, I'm okay. I mean, I'm not doing any kind of wrong thing, am I? I mean, I'm trying to ask you the question without you think I'm crazy.
No, ma'am. Listen, I have great respect for your question and the fact that you've taken time to call. You said that in your first marriage, your husband kept leaving you. Is that correct?
Yes, he kept leaving me, and then the last time he left me, I didn't want to be with him anymore, and I left. He left me, and I wound up filing for divorce like a year later.
Okay.
And
I was just going to ask, was he committing adultery? Is that why he left you?
No, he didn't commit adultery or anything. I mean, it was just something that our marriage was going through. It wasn't adultery or anything like that. He just, I mean, I really don't know, but as far as I know, he wasn't committing adultery.
I think based on what you've told me, and I'll let these other two brethren join in, Matthew chapter 19, in verse 9, the only scriptural reason for divorcing a mate and then entering into another marital relationship would be your spouse committing adultery and you being the innocent party. It doesn't sound like that's the situation there, but let me let one of these other brothers join in as well.
One of the things that came to my mind was from 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He describes a situation where one of the spouses has just left the other, but not necessarily for fornication. And he says in 1 Corinthians 7:10, let not the wife depart from her husband, and if she depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. And so if one spouse has departed and there has been no fornication, he says you don't have the right to remarry, because the Lord said, Matthew 19:9, fornication is the only reason that you can put away your spouse and remarry scripturally.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, y'all helped out a lot, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We just found y'all on the computer, the internet, and we started watching you. We got very interested.
Yes, ma'am. Well,
I appreciate your time.
Yes, ma'am. And listen, we'll be praying for you. And you go back and read Matthew chapter 19, 1 Corinthians chapter 7. That'll help you a lot. Sure will. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Our time is gone. We've got about 30 seconds left. BJ and Don, thank you so much for being a part of the program. What a great program.
Good program.
And we appreciate so much those that have called in, written in. And this is a tough subject because anytime you talk about marriage, the dynamics also lead to the possibility of divorce. And so thank you. Hope to see you again next Thursday night, right back here. We plan to be here, and the Lord willing, we will see you. Until then, God bless you.